Welcome, everyone, to Being Magnetic, the podcast that taps into your magnetism to be the powerful leader speaker that you are. I'm Tina B, and I'm an intuitive communication coach. And I'm so excited to provide a little bit of context here for this particular episode in season 1 about doing stand-up comedy, and specifically with Zach Peterson, who happens to be an outstanding comedian who's traveled nationally and shared funny observations with the world about what he sees and how he experiences it. And he taught me the richness of this thing we call funny. That if you're having fun, the audience will have fun. And so he taught a 5-week course at the Backline Comedy Club, and he's been teaching this for quite some time. And he even said, what's great is this is a workshop. We workshop before as well as during, and we could get feedback. And I loved how he was not only great at listening and providing tweaks of how to make something funnier, and things to then also take out. But also he taught us foundationally, it's all about premise and punchline, as well as different stylistic choices that you can make for types of funny. So from monologue to storytelling, we learn a lot. And so I appreciate this conversation with him. The other thing to note with this episode that is really, really interesting is how I'd had a really rough conversation prior to interviewing him. And so energetically, I was off kilter. So I just didn't feel like myself, very far from magnetic. And what's interesting is not only the conversation was good and fine, he did great. I felt off. And then what's funny is that the actual video in this platform took more than 24 hours to upload. So it just goes to show that everything is energy. Your energetic frequency definitely impacts how you show up in conversation, and being grounded and taking that spaciousness of maybe not doing a thing before another thing that can maybe impact your emotional stature and way of being, and learn from Zach Peterson. I'm so excited to have with me today Zach Peterson, who's not only a stand-up comedian, but also educates and teaches comedy. First of all, his most recent show that he did is a list of wet celebrity, was ranked number 1 on iTunes. He also travels nationwide performing stand-up and has been on a wide range of comedy festivals ranging from Laughing Skill and beyond. And he was cited as the funniest guy around by Minneapolis City Pages. Well, that's a great title to have. Who doesn't want to be known as the funniest guy around? So I'm super excited to have you here, Zach. And I would love to kick it off with having you talk with us about when was that first moment that you remember humor, laughing, maybe making other people laugh?
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, my dad and my brother, growing up, my dad is very funny, very charming, and when he wants to be, and you can tell he's always joking around and loves the idea of being funny, and would show us obscure and like comedy that we wouldn't have gotten exposed to growing up without him making sure that we do, like a lot of the early SCTV and Saturday Night Lives and all the Monty Pythons and everything in between that from, what was on TV at the time, but grew up with comedy and media being very important and discussed quite often.
Well, I love it that you had that beautiful exposure. It sounds like all forms of media. And so that makes me curious. How would you define humor?
Hmm. I mean, that's difficult, but I would guess I would say that humor is just, happiness that can be shared. It can be, whether it's like clever or whether you're eliciting an involuntary reaction to a joke. It's essentially just sharing happiness or joy in one way or another, whether it be a clever joke or a surprise or whatever have you.
Yeah, there's lots of strategies and ways in which we get to be amused and how we amuse others verbally and non-verbally. And so I like to think that humor is such a beautiful way to connect us with other people and to ignite magnetism. I teach communication and specifically believe that in order to get people to choose to listen to you, they have to be magnetic. And I define that as using your words, voice, your body, your overall essence to make that impact you desire. So I'd love to hear from you. How do you think humor, being, funny and comedy, links to magnetism, that attraction?
Well, I mean, it's disarming, right? Like, if someone is funny up top, you trust them more. You wanting and willing to hear more. Your guard is down, and also people use it to engage with others because the nuances of communication, the nuance of actual like interpersonal stuff is so difficult, but you're doing a good job when the person is laughing. So even if you don't have those skills to read the nuances of other folks, you know that laughter, you're on the right track. So it's a tool to sort of read other people and to get them on the side that you want them to be on is, listening to you. And if you are making people laugh, they will listen because they expect more, you know, to be coming. Funnier stuff. There's no quicker way to get someone to like you than to make them laugh.
Absolutely. So I'm curious then, what's your creative process? You do a lot of stand up, a lot of teaching. What is your creative process for getting from the beginning to the end when we see you on stage? And I've seen you do stand up. You are a funny, funny guy.
Thank you. It really stems from a premise, from an idea, from a singular idea, whether it be a sentence or just a statement, an argument in class. I call it the headline, the premise. It comes from that, like, okay, here's this thought I have. Now, what are the many ways that I can explain it? And when I have that singular idea, I will write the idea, maybe a few like examples of that idea, like arguments about how that can be backed up. And then I will journal about it for, days, like 3 or 4 pages a day on the same idea, finding little parts that I do like and incorporating those together. And I'll find those little parts that I think are the funniest, and I will tie them together somehow in an organic narrative structure to where it seems like I'm having a singular conversation with one person, but I know that I want to have to tailor it for a group of people. And I'm talking to a lot of people at once, so it's essentially making it very, like, almost intimate with a singular person, but also casting a wide net of making sure that everyone is on the same page and directing traffic that way, where it's like, okay, this is what we're thinking about, and this is what we think about this. So it bears very distinct lines of what I think and how I think about it, but it has to become very much my own by having these ideas and the singular idea of the premise come through. That the most important part is that my initial thought comes through in many different forms, but that one singular thought is heard.
Yeah, I like how you broke it down in that you get an idea and then you let it incubate, marinate a little bit, and you do this through writing. And it makes me think of Jerry Seinfeld, where he doesn't break the chain; he writes every day. And I remember you stressing that when I took your class. You have a writing process. You write, you're committed, you write every day, and then the noodling that happens through that, I think, is when you have a bazillion ideas, you don't use them all, but you get maybe that piece of gold because you write every day, then testing it with people and maybe conversation and safe audiences to kind of see if it lands. Because ultimately, if you find it funny, there's a chance somebody else might, but it's always good to test it. So I'd love to know, how do you get your ideas? Because sometimes that's the hardest part, right? Is I remember in class, you really stressed, and this was what was like a shift for me, is, oh, I have to have a really strong opinion about something. And that's the foundation to make the jokes land. So yeah, talk about that a little bit. How do you get an idea?
I think of this quote I read in the Rick Rubin book. It's about creating, and I sort of take inventory of my own ideas of what I notice, but haven't heard other people say, because I think it's very important to be original, to have your own thoughts, because if you're just repeating thoughts that you've heard or have heard other people say, you're not actually saying your thoughts. And if we are to believe that comedy is an art or a craft, then that art is to make ideas that are either a little bit hard to grasp or inconvenient and make them easy to grasp and convenient for everyone else to have. So when I have an idea that I find funny, first of all, I have to be excited about it because I'll write things and then at the end of it, I'll be like, I don't even like this. Like, like this isn't, I'm not excited about this. But when there is something, I'll go, oh, that's fun. Like I'll have a good time messing with that and getting on stage and just being silly with it and seeing what comes of it. That's my favorite part, is sort of seeing how those ideas grow. And if I find one that I find interesting, new, and I feel like it can grow with the time and effort that I put into it, then I think that's something that I should work towards. When I don't have ideas, because there's a lot of times where I don't have ideas where I feel like I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel. I've been doing this for about 15 years consistently. And so there's a lot of times where it's like, I don't think I have anything else to say. I have hours of stand-up comedy, that I've done in the past. Like, what else do I really have to say? So I'll go with my old writing, the writing of every day. I'll flip through and go, oh, that was a decent thought. And then maybe that thought becomes new. Maybe that thought becomes interesting to me. Maybe I have new thoughts that I could sort of branch off into that other thought and I can use that in one way or another. Or maybe that makes me think of a completely new thought. It's just, finding the gold nugget in all the, in the rivers of thought. It takes forever. And it's the hard part. If it was easy to come up with a new thought that was interesting and funny, then comedy would be easy. And we all know it's not.
Yeah, I totally can echo that. I second that emotion. It is not as
Mhm.
easy as you think. And especially stand up is very different style than improv or than a keynote speech or a workshop, what have you. I mean, you're naked, vulnerable up there with your ideas. And I like what you talked about because I was curious of how do you get unstuck, and you laid it out nicely. You return to your file, your creative file of all those past journal entries, and maybe because you've had distance from it, it gives you a fresh new perspective or maybe a new angle because you had a different experience the day prior that can maybe parallel well with it. And I think that even shifting, I've found with my clients, I encourage them to shift where you write, shift where you're thinking, go for a walk, like changing the environment, and don't get rid of your stories. Don't get rid of those different thoughts and ideas, because who's to say you don't use it for a brand new speech at some point? So I appreciate you noting that.
Right. Well, there's an old story about Mitch Hedberg, the great comedian from the 90s and 2000s, where he would go and write in a Target food court
Hmm.
because he felt the most uncomfortable there. And because he felt uncomfortable, that he thought, and I mean, judging by his comedy, he was probably right that being in a new place that's completely uncomfortable would make his mind work in a way that it didn't usually. So yeah, I think totally go for what, do anything different when you have
Yeah.
different thoughts.
Now, have you ever gone to somewhere different completely to do that?
Yes. A lot of the time when I'm writing or I'm trying to write as much as possible is when I'm performing the most. And if I'm performing the most, that means I'm on the road. That means I'm traveling. That means I'm in a Barnes and Noble in Lexington, Kentucky, or, a Starbucks in Alabama. Like, who knows? Like, I'm completely uncomfortable. I'm untethered. I'm just floating around the United States, and roadside motels in Texas. It's just wherever I have time and whenever things strike me as interesting. Like I have a ton of voice memos on my phone. Like I would drive in, I'll just like say a few things and then I'll go back and revisit it.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point also, that it's important to have record of your ideas and that you have a journal that you write things down. I think that's important, as well as an audio voice recording. When you don't have a pen in hand, you have your phone right there. Maybe even on your laptop, you might have files, who knows? But I think it's really important to keep a record and have a way in which we file our ideas so that we can, with ease, pull them out. I'd love for us to transition into the experience we had together this past year when I was fortunate enough to get into your very popular stand-up comedy class that you gifted the Backline Comedy Club, and you do it so beautifully. In fact, I was one of few in that group that had never taken it before, because it's, different ones I talk to, they keep learning from you, they keep practicing from you, because you do foster a beautifully safe space to practice, but also provide lovely framework. So talk a little bit what your experience was, because for me, I have seen stand up a lot. I love to laugh. I love stand up. And I was very terrified, to be honest. It was my very first experience, of doing this thing we call stand up. So I would love to hear your memory of that experience.
First of all, I love teaching. I feel like teaching stand up and doing stand up almost like rank very similar in terms of how much enjoyment I get out of it and the effort I put forth. Every class is different, but I do have a lot of them, so you may forgive me if I don't have specific remembrances of all the classes because it's 5 weeks plus the workshops that we do. You came to multiple workshops,
Oh, yes.
correct?
And the fact that you offered those outside of class workshops was so valuable, because I learned from everybody else's feedback to help with my own bits.
Yeah, and I think stand up and so many other things, it's difficult to teach because there is not a singular way, and you have to find your own way. But at the same time, like direction has to be made, and somehow I can't teach a class that's like, hey, good luck. That's that's not good. But like opening up those workshops is like I don't want my voice to be the monolithic voice of stand-up comedy. I want people to, understand that they have to make their own way and sort of be free to do things the way that they see fit. And if the only input that you're getting is me, then there's just going to be a bunch of comedians that sound exactly like me. And that's not what I want. I guess what I would like, I guess, ask you a question, like what part of it did resonated the most with you? Because we talk about like the presentation of like joke structure of like setup and punchline and the different ways of putting that together and presenting it as an organic thought. And then there's the, like the stuff you've already brought up about the technical continue to write, where your ideas come from, how to put them together, and then slowly editing them down.
Well, from my experience, I felt like it was such a great balance of content and delivery. Like, both are so important when we present to an audience, and especially with comedy. You can deliver and have a great animated facial expressions, physical delivery, and have a gorgeous voice, and your content could fall flat. Or you could have really great content, and yet your delivery doesn't have that punch. And so it's like what you said earlier, you first have to like the idea. And I remember in your class, I was forcing an idea. I was like, oh, I'm going to do this one idea. And it's because it was different than everybody else's, but it was like at the end of the day, I'm like, wait a minute, that's not what I want to do. And I think for me, seeing samples was really helpful. Like, you would show clips, and then you would break it down and analyze. Here's what they did. This is a premise, and then they did it in this way. And through storytelling, or through a list of three things, the third being the most funny. And you really also stress, that stood with me, that made it high pressure, but also high reward, is you got to do it quick. Get going. And we only had 4 minutes, which really, I've done TEDx twice, and we get under 18 minutes, which still feels short sometimes, because I've done hour-long keynotes or 4 to 8 hour workshops. So 4 minutes is like so hard. what was valuable to me from the experience with you as the teacher was not only that gift of teaching what it is we call comedy and stand up and giving the words like premise, you know, here's a bit, we break this bit down this way, and then providing really specific feedback after we would get up and practice. And I remember that first time I got up there, it was silence. Nobody laughed. And it was chirp, 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 chirp. And you were so delightfully encouraging and helpful to get me to that point where when I performed with the other 11 classmates, I got laughs and I had fun. I had fun because of the stair step of process. Like you really did a nice job of responding to my emails when I was like freaking out, like, I don't know what to do. I felt so crippled. Well, part of it was the helpful feedback that Tina, you sound like a TEDx speaker. I was like, well, of course, that's my comfort zone. And you did a nice job of this is a very different, it's an art. Comedy is an art. Stand-up is definitely its own beast, its own art. And doing it well, I now have a bigger, deeper appreciation because to have that magnetism, when you came on stage, you warm up the crowd with your delivery, with your warmth, and with your enthusiasm. And in fact, my best friend who came to the show said, I've been to a lot of stand up, but I've never seen all 12. Like when you see a lot of stand up, usually there's one or two that are like missed the mark. He said, not a single person missed the mark. Every single person was funny. And so you have this gift of drawing out stylistic choices, of embracing, like I have a Carol Burnett, more animated style, and being encouraged to be bigger with that. And that I do love telling story, and storytelling is a little bit more my jam, as opposed to some people were great with the punch, 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 like series of punches every beat.
Yeah, there's a couple of things from that I definitely wanna talk about. First of all, I've done TEDx too. Most intimidating thing in my life. I can't, like, I mean, like, it's a completely different thing. Like, I did it, I was like, "I don't know how I'm doing this." Like, this is complete because I'm so used to set up, punchline, laugh,
Hmm.
and without that, I don't know what I'm doing, because it's like this actual story without the focus on the laughs, and oof, it was hard for me. It was very even though, like, I am a professional public speaker, when it came to being serious, completely different animal. It's so difficult.
Right. Well, it's just a different style, a
It
different
really
order in
is.
which you wait. One idea we're spreading now, and you could argue that in stand up, you do have one premise, one idea, and then you break it down. But you're right. It's a longer, drawn out experience that in TEDx. And so I'm curious, what would you say are some insights or helpful tips that could help people embed humor to be more magnetic when they communicate, whether it is as a TEDx or keynote speaker, engaging people as a workshop facilitator, or in just casual conversation, like at networking events or interpersonally with friends, family?
Oh, sure. Yeah, also, I wanted to say that I remember those emails because I think you were probably one of the, most engaged students I've had. That's
Oh,
like, I need, like, because well, I got because there's a lot of people that take the class and they're like, "Well, hopefully this works," and they don't really,
mm.
like, put it out there, like, really try and, like, do the work and are, and making sure it works. And, you definitely did. And, like,
Oh, thank
and so
you.
you knew that you were gonna be successful from, very early on. And you're talking about the early, like, sort of workshops and, like, putting, like, first time on stage, second time on stage. I tell my students because of that, like, the class is the hard part. Once you get on stage, that's when it's, like, fun because we're analyzing, we're thinking, we're improving, we're thinking about where this bit can go and how it can be better, and we're not reacting like the audience is going to, who's going to have a good time, who supposedly wants to have a good time. Okay, and the 12-person class, yes, that was the most people I've had stay all the way through. And I was
Really?
yeah, because a lot of the time some will, like, sort of things will come up or whatever. So and 12 people we had to fit in an hour and we did it. But I remember being very stressed that day. But it couldn't have gone better. Now, answering the other question, I just wanted to make sure I said those things because I had a mental list going on. In terms of how to get people to be engaged, and we talked about this the first class, and it's the first point I try to make when we do stand up. Like the most important thing that you can do as a speaker is be trusted, is to create trust. And you do that by being genuine because people will trust you when you tell the truth. As simple as that. So if we can establish that what we are saying is important to us and is truthful, and we are someone worth trusting, then we will be engaged with the audience. Because as soon as someone says, well, they're full of crap, they're full of BS or whatever, they're going to tune out and they're going to start looking for, problems with your argument or your story or whatever. They're going to start reacting instead of thinking or being along with you. They're going to work against you. So being trustworthy is the number one rule that I would say in any public speaking. And how do we become trustworthy right away? I mean, a joke is always nice. That's why they do jokes right up top, is because that's the quickest way to get someone to like you, is to, say, okay, I'm in good hands. Because we are introducing ourselves to someone and they have to make a snap decision whether or not they're on board. When I talk to my students about what kind of jokes we're going to do, or set construction, about putting the more risque jokes up front, or if to do like the darker jokes at all, it's like, if your train of thought is going down the track, you don't want people to jump off. And if you give them any opportunity to do so, they will. So you have to make sure that we are trusted and we are liked, and then we can essentially talk, about almost anything and people will be on board.
Well, it sounds too, when it comes to content, that you are very strategic of building that trust with some easy jokes first and not kicking it off with a dark joke right away. Mainly because that would be maybe a little off putting or a little too much for the audience and even risque. You got to get a feel, I think, for what kind of crowd is it? Where are you at? Are you in a certain geographic location that absolutely wants more conservative, soft, clean types of jokes? And I think that that's really important when you tune into the people around you.
Yeah. I mean, it's simply like when you trust someone, someone, like you give them the benefit of the doubt. And if there's ever any doubt, you want the benefit. And so either you don't create doubt, or you have created a relationship with the audience to a degree where they go, they mean well, because there are comics that do dark humor and people love it because they think that they know them. And it's like they don't, that's not what they really mean, or like they're whatever. And like most of them are celebrities. And us as stand-up comics who no one has heard of me. So when I go into a bar or a club in, Minnesota or something, like I have to prove that, they can relax, they can put their guard down. We're going to have a good time and I'm not here to bum anyone out or piss anyone off.
Well, I would argue you are a celebrity, particularly in Omaha. And I think you're expanding as you put content out there and continue to share your humor and heart. And you are one of those that are easy to trust and listen to. So I would love for you to share with the audience if they want to get in touch with you or find you. What's the best way to do that, Zach?
ZachPetersonComedy.com. It has my tour dates. It has my special. It has contact information. It has all the stuff you need. Yeah, I mean, and it has all my social media on there. So if you wanted to follow me on Blue Sky or Instagram and stuff like that, all the stuff is there. King of the River Peterson on Instagram, and Zeepers on Letterboxd, which I wish was more of like a emphasis in terms of social media, was Letterboxd,
Sure.
because just talk about movies, make social media better.
Yes, for sure. Perfect. Perfect. Well, so what would be one last insight or thought as we sign off today that you want people to know?
Go out and see some live comedy. Support the I mean, it's when I say the arts, that always reminds me of like ballet or like sculpture or something, and it never makes me think of a bar and someone doing stand-up comedy. But yeah, just go see a show, do your research, and enjoy yourself. Is I think stand-up comedy is it's one of my favorite things in the world, obviously, and I think there's a place for everyone in it, and everyone can find something that they like.
Absolutely. I do agree with you so heartily in terms of the idea of laughing, and laughter is contagious. It's beautiful fuel for the soul. So, echoing that sentiment of go check out some stand up. And so, with that, I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Be Magnetic here with Tina B. And if you're looking for more tips, you can certainly check out my book, Discovering Our Magnetic Speaker Within, which is on my website. And I want to do a heart centered, big love to you, Zach, for showing up today, for adding really beautiful insights. And if you, the listener, are seeing that there's some form of added value, please share this episode and reach out to me at tinabakehouse.com. Till next time, remember to be you and be true.